All right, in this video, we're going to talk about how to add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. Just like with like denominators, we actually learned this last week. And again, I'm sending you these videos just to refresh your memory, because you're going to have to go on IXL and you're going to have to work with mastering adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numerals with unlike denominators. So if I had something like 3 3/5 plus 2 7/10, and I wanted to add those, okay, I can't add the numerators and keep the denominators the same if the denominators are different. So the first thing I have to do is I have to get the same denominator. I have to find a common denominator. And I want a number that 5 and 10 both go into evenly. But I don't want just any number that 5 and 10 goes into evenly. I want it to try to be as small as possible. That's called the least common denominator. You see, a lot of people, when they want to find a number that 5 and 10 both go into evenly, they say, oh, that's simple. Multiply 5 times 10, and it equals 50. Now, that is a common denominator, but it is not the best common denominator because it's not the least. And you might say, why do we need the least common denominator? And I say, because the smaller it is, the easier it is to work with. And the smaller it is, the easier it is to simplify. And remember, if it's not simplified, it is incorrect. So the first thing I have to do is say, how can I find the smallest number that 5 and 10 both go into evenly? And the easiest way to do that is to pick the biggest denominator, which in this case is 10, and list the 10 times table until you find something that 5 goes into evenly. So 10 times 1 is 10. Does 5 go into that evenly? It does. Ding, ding, ding. The common denominator was not 50, it was 10. And again, excuse me, that's only the first step. Now I have to find the missing numerator, which we've already taken a test on last 9 weeks. And remember, it's a matter of divide and then multiply. Because to get equivalent fractions, you have to multiply the numerator and denominator both by the same number. So the question is, what times 5 equals 10, or closest to it without going over? And the answer is 2, because 5 goes into 10 2 times. But 2 does not go up here, because since I multiplied 5 times 2 to get 10, I have to multiply 3 times 2 to find the missing numerator. So 2 times 3 is 6. So the equivalent fraction with a common denominator is 6/10. And then here, 10 goes into 10 once, and 1 times 7 equals 7. By the way, if 7/10 doesn't equal 7/10, we have a serious problem. So again, that is my equivalent fractions with the missing numerators and a common denominator. So once I find the common denominator and find the missing numerator, I'm back to where we were before. All I have to do is add the numerators and the whole numbers and keep the denominator the same. So the numerators are 6 and 7 is 13/10, and 3 plus 2 is 5. And again, that's my answer, but unfortunately it's wrong, and it's wrong because it's improper. So 13 is bigger than 10, so I divide 10 into 13 goes once. 1 times 10 is 10, remainder 3, and my answer becomes 1 3/10. But 5 13/10 cannot equal 1 3/10. Okay, 5 13/10, you have to add the 1 to the 5, and it really equals 6 3/10. And the last thing you have to do is make sure it's simplified. And again, in this case, the only thing that goes into 3 evenly is 3, and 3 doesn't go into 10, so this is simplified, and it is my final answer. And again, you have 5 steps you must follow. First, you must find the common denominator. Then you must find the missing numerator. Then you add the numerators and the whole numbers, keep the denominator the same, make it proper, and make it simplified. And again, in fractions, always, the thing that causes people the most trouble is they don't make it proper and they don't make it simplified. And in my class, if it's not proper and simplified, it's wrong. Now, sometimes you could be asked to add 3 mixed numerals, which you will on IXL. So if I had something like 3 and 5/12 plus 4 and 7/8 plus 2 and 5/6, and I wanted to add these, what I need is I need to find a number that 12, 8, and 6 all go into evenly. And I don't want to multiply 8 times 12 times 6 because that is in the hundreds, and I don't want to work with a denominator that big. So to find the least common denominator, you take the biggest denominator, which in this case is 12, and you list the 12 times table until you find something that 8 and 6 both go into evenly. 12 times 1 is 12. Does 8 go into that evenly? No. 12 times 2 is 24. Does 8 go into that evenly? Yes. Does 6 go into that evenly? Yes. The common denominator, ding, 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 is 24. And again, don't just multiply the numbers times each other to get the common denominator, because that would be insane. Your answer would be 500 and something, and you don't want an answer that big, okay? So again, now that I have the least common denominator, which is 24, I can find the missing numerators. 12 goes into 24 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. 8 goes into 24 3 times. 3 times 7 is 21. And 6 goes into 24 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20. Now that I have the right common denominator and I have the missing numerators correct, I can add. And I add the numerators. And there are 3 of them now. I like to write them on the side so I don't accidentally add a denominator. But you can add them here. I think it's better to do it on the side. 0 plus 1 plus 0 is 1. 1 plus 2 is 3 plus 2 is 5. This comes out to be 51. 51 24s. You also add the whole numbers. 3 and 4 is 7 plus 2 is 9. By the way, what happens to some people, they get so wrapped up in finding the common denominator and adding the fractions, they forget about the whole numbers. Don't forget about the whole numbers. You add the numerators and the whole numbers, keep the denominator the same. Some people add the whole numbers first so they don't forget about them. I'm not sure that's not that bad an idea. At least it'll make sure you have it. Anyway, 9 and 51 24ths is improper. How do I make it proper? I divide 24 into 51. And 2 goes into 5 twice, shift back 1 place. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. Did I guess too big? No, I can subtract. If I borrow from the 5 and make it a 4. 11 minus 8 is 3. And now, I didn't guess too little. 3 is less than 24, so I can write my remainder as 3 24s. So my answer is 2 and 3 24s, right? No, because 9 and 51 24s can't equal 2 and 3 24s. I have to add the 2 to the 9, and I get 11 and 3 24s. And now you may say, okay, I'm finished. But if you stop at this point, that's really, really sad. Because if you stop at this point, you did everything right, but your answer is completely wrong, in my class at least. Because 3 24ths is not simplified. What goes into both 3 and 24? 3 does. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 24 8 times. So the right answer is 11 and 1/8. So adding 3 mixed numerals is the same as adding 2, except it's a little harder and takes a little longer to find the common denominator. But you still take the biggest denominator and list the multiples of that denominator until both of the other ones go into it evenly. In this case, that wasn't all that hard. Sometimes you might have to list 3, 4, or 5 before you find it. Now finally, we also talked about how to subtract mixed numerals with unlike denominators. And again, it's the same basic thing. 5 and 7/9 minus 2 and 1/3. I need a common denominator for 9 and 3. And again, you can list the 9 times table until you find something that 3 goes into, which doesn't take very long because 9 times 1 is 9 and 3 goes into it. Ding, ding, ding. The common denominator is 9. You'll notice that when I subtract mixed numerals, I bring the whole numbers over. I didn't do that when I was adding, but I do that when I'm subtracting. Okay, and now I have to find the missing numerators. Sorry. 9 goes into 9 once. 1 times 7 is 7. And once again, if 7/9 doesn't equal 7/9, we got a serious problem. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 1 is 3. So now I can subtract 7/9 minus 3/9 equals 4/9. And 5 minus 2 is 3. Make sure your answer is proper. It almost always is when you subtract, because 4 is less than 9, I'm all right. And make sure it's simplified. And again, you don't just say it is, you check 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. 2 goes in the top but not the bottom, so you can't use it. 3 goes in the bottom but not the top, so you can't use it. 5, 7, and 11 are bigger than 4, so they don't go. And 4 doesn't go to 9, so the numerator doesn't work. So this is simplified, and it is my final answer. So again, you have a homework, IXL homework assignment, where you have to add fractions and mixed numerals with unlike denominators. You have to subtract fractions with unlike denominators, and you have to add mixed numerals with unlike denominators, even 3 of them. So all of those are starred, and all of those are things you can work on this week.